Well, wintertime is upon us, and one of the favorite dishes in cold weather is lasagna. A lot of people love lasagna. We certainly like to have it. We've got some company coming over in a couple of days, and it's easy to make, easy to serve, and if you have leftovers, they store really well in the freezer to bring out later. So I'm going to go through the steps I follow to make my handwritten, world-famous lasagna recipe for you today, so follow along and see how it's done. There are three main parts to lasagna. First part is the meat sauce made up with tomatoes and tomato paste and sauce, some seasoning, Italian seasoning, a little bit of garlic. Fry this up, mix it together. Second part is the sauce that goes on, made of ricotta cheese, egg, parsley, spinach, and some freshly ground hard cheeses. And then the third essential part are the lasagna noodles that have to be layered in here. And this is done in a couple of layers, and then mozzarella cheese layered in with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this pork started and get that seasoned. Now, what I did in advance, I always do this, makes it easier for myself, is I have three seasonings here, which are oregano and basil, a tablespoon of each, and I have some ground pepper, about a half a teaspoon of ground pepper. I just grind that into the top of the mix, and some salt, about a half a teaspoon of salt that I put in. Now it's all ready, I just have to put that in when I'm ready to start cooking. And the garlic I will prepare right now, just get that mashed. That's easy enough to do. I just dice it a little bit, not too much, and that is ready. So let's get this pork going. I'm going to put the burner on this aluminum fry pan at about 4 gas range. That starts heating up. And I'm just going to drop that ground pork in, 1 pound of ground pork, and divide that up a little bit in the pan so it starts to fry. When the pan heats up, so that's all distributed in the pan. And I'm going to toss that garlic in with it so that can fry with it. It's just starting to sizzle now. The heat's coming up. Now I'll have to turn this burner down a little bit once it gets warmed up. This is the big burner and it gets pretty hot. But I just want to get some heat on it. I'll turn it down a little bit now, and I will get this browned up before we start adding the other ingredients. Okay, I've got the pork browned nicely. The garlic has softened up. So I'm going to add about a half a quart of these tomatoes in here. These are our home canned tomatoes. I oftentimes will just buy ripe tomatoes in the store and use whole ripe tomatoes to make this. But today I'm just going to use our canned tomatoes. I've got a lot of them and they work just as well. They're already softened up. I've got that in there. I may add a little bit more. I don't want too much in here. If I do get too much, I can always cook it down. I'm going to add just a small 8-ounce can of tomato sauce. Again, I have tomato sauce that we've canned here, and I could use that, but it's in pint jars, and then I would have a half a pint of tomato sauce sitting there. Not necessarily any place to go with it. So I'm going to use some canned tomato sauce today. Get that all in there. And then a 6-ounce can of tomato paste. Give it some body, give it a little more flavor, the concentrated flavor from the paste. And then finally, the seasoning that I've mixed together in this dish. Just take my spatula here and get this stirred together, mixed in really well, so the tomato is distributed evenly. Smells good already. It'll smell even better once this starts to cook down and thicken up, because you do want it fairly thick when you're putting it in the lasagna. While the meat sauce is cooking and starting to reduce, we're going to now cook the noodles. I use 9 lasagna noodles. That gives me all the noodles I need for the layers in the lasagna. So when I cook these, here's the method I use. So that they cook evenly, I just try to distribute them around the pan instead of put them in one big clump, and let the ends stick out here a little bit. That will stop the water from boiling for a second. We want to bring that water to a boil. The noodles are starting to soften where they'll settle into the pan now. I've got this water to a boil again, and then when the noodles push down in, and this way they don't break, they soften in there slowly and they lay a little flatter so they don't get gnarled up in the water. And we'll get this back to an active boil, and we'll cook these for about 10 minutes. With the sauce cooking down yet for another, maybe 10 minutes, and the noodles have another few minutes to cook, we are now going to make our sauce. It's a good time to do that. I have broken 2 eggs into this bowl, and I'm just going to whisk them a little bit to get them stirred up good. And that will be good for that. Throw that in my waiting dish of warm dishwater. Now we add 2 cups of ricotta cheese. Unfortunately, 1 container is never quite enough. These are 15-ounce containers. We get all sorts of odd sizes of things nowadays. Can't just have a 16-ounce container. Doesn't work well when your fingers are covered with ricotta. Kind of hard to get that plastic off. All right, there's my 2nd cup. I'm going to put that in. Get my cup off to the side. We add half of a 10-ounce package of frozen spinach, chopped. Get that started in there. And now we add this cheese, and what I do, it calls for a 1/4 cup each of some Romano and parmesan cheese, and I just take my small grater, I put a 1/4 cup measure on a small plate, and I grate off very carefully a 1/4 cup of one and a 1/4 cup of the other, and that gives me the 1/2 cup combination of cheese that I need for this mix. And I always use hard cheese and grate it myself. It doesn't have all the additives in it that pre-shredded cheese will have. I don't like using that pre-packaged, pre-processed stuff. And then finally it calls for a couple tablespoons of parsley. This is actually a little more because it's fresh parsley. I chopped it up rather than use the dried parsley. So we'll throw that in and mix this together. And there is our cheese sauce. I'll check on the noodles and the meat, and we'll start putting this thing together. Everything's cooked and softened, and we are ready to put it all together. The final step. So I will be putting half of this meat sauce on and half of this sauce on to the first layer. with some cheese on top of that, and then do another layer. Now, how do I make sure I get exactly half? I just draw a line with my spoon through the meat sauce halfway, and then I just take half. And here I do roughly the same thing. I get half of it out and distributed on the noodles, which I took the liberty of putting in before we started. 3 on the bottom. I always cook extra noodles just in case, because sometimes they get knotted up, sometimes they break. Well, that's about half the sauce. So I'm going to take the back of the spoon and just distribute that evenly in here. And by the way, this 13 by 9 pan, before I put the noodles in, I sprayed it with some olive oil spray. I don't use regular cooking oil spray. I like to use olive oil for everything. And that will help keep this from sticking once it gets baked. So we've got that in there. I've got my meat sauce. Half of that goes on here. Try to spread that out as evenly as possible with a spoon so I don't have to spread it too much. All right, we will take the back of this spoon and move it around. Try not to get the other sauce on this spoon so we don't get that in. I guess it probably doesn't make any difference. It all blends together anyway, but just keep everything separate. I like to. I had the grocery store slice some mozzarella for me. This is about a pound's worth sliced, as thin as they could do it in the machine. There's a limit to how thin you can slice mozzarella because it's so gummy, but they did a really good job for me. And of course, mozzarella is very sticky. And with these thin slices, it's kind of a treat to get it out of here. Turn it over, see if I have better results with this side. Now that doesn't want to come apart, so we'll go for a little bit bigger piece here so we can move this along. She warned me it would be a little uneven in spots. It's very hard. We have a slicer here at home that we use to slice up roast to make sandwich meat, because I won't buy deli meat. It's got too many additives in it. So if we want sandwich meat, we grind our own, or we cut our own with a slicer. And my slicer would probably make a real mess of this mozzarella. So it's not a big industrial model like they have at the deli counter. Little part of a piece here, lay it on, and we're ready for some more noodles. The noodles, I drained them in this colander, then I rinsed them off to get some of that gluten off of there so they don't stick together so bad. And in this case, these are a little narrower. I had to use up one box and start a new box, and these are a little smaller, and that's where sometimes it pays to just cook a couple extra up. And these are shorter, and I've run into this. They don't go the full length of the pan, so I take one and I take an end off, lay it down here to make sure I've got good coverage, and we'll put the rest of our sauce on. Now I don't have to measure so much. I'm just going to use the other half up. Here's where a spatula comes in handy to get it all scraped down. Get this moved around. Waste not, want not. And the other half of the meat sauce. The aroma is just fabulous. Those Italian spices we're able to work in. I don't use any pre-made sauce. In fact, I have to make some spaghetti sauce tomorrow for something else, and that will all be from scratch. And toss on the rest of the cheese. So far, the cheese has been the hardest part of this whole process. And again, this is cut freshly off a big block of cheese. Yeah, you can buy mozzarella pre-sliced, I guess. I don't like that either. Get this peeled off so it's just a little thinner there. That's a nice thick one. Here's a side note, we do not eat pre-processed, ultra-processed food at all. We make everything from scratch. A lot of it we grow ourselves. Makes a big difference in your health, how you feel. A little thin right there, so we'll put a little extra on. And we've used up our pound of cheese, and we are ready to either put this in the refrigerator or we can bake it right away. I am going to bake this tonight so that it flavors through for when we want to use it. I like to do that. It just helps the flavors develop. I have to wait a little bit though, because I also happen to be baking a loaf of bread at the moment. I've got to wait for that to get done and for the oven to cool down a little bit. So we'll look at this when it's all done. Bread's done baking. I turn the oven down to 375, and I'm going to bake this for about a half an hour. Now, if this was out of the refrigerator and not quite warmed up to room temperature, still had a little chill on it, you'd want to bake it for maybe 45 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for a half an hour, and we'll check this out. And there you have a completed lasagna, just starting to brown around the edges. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator overnight. Tomorrow, before our company gets here, we'll heat it up in the oven a little bit and cut some slices, and it'll work out just great. And as you can see, it didn't take me a whole lot of effort to make this lasagna. It doesn't really take a lot of time to do. It's so much better than what you can buy as a pre-made lasagna in the store, and it doesn't have all the extra, I'll just call it stuff in it, that you really don't want to be eating. So I suggest if you like lasagna, give it a try. Make your own. I think you'll be very surprised and satisfied with the result. Once again, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and learned something from it, please click like and consider subscribing to our channel. And please comment on anything you'd like to see in the future or what you thought of our video. We appreciate the comments. It helps us decide what we should show next. So until next time, enjoy your projects. Take care.